Disco is trying to join the NWO. And he's out here taking on Booker T. Booker T is going to get a win here in 9 minutes and 19 seconds. He wins with the Harlem Hangover. Disco was not injured, although it did look pretty scary. I feel like we should take a timeout right here and talk about, did you see the Sammy Guevara accident with Jeff Hardy on social?
Yeah, I did.
As a fan, I admit I don't know fuck all about wrestling, but I wondered, do you think we see injuries like that happen because we're not getting as many reps as we did back in the day? I mean, these guys are working so infrequently now that they may only wrestle a handful of times a year versus once upon a time, you'd wrestle 4 or 5 times in a week. What'd you think when you saw the accident with Sammy and Jeff Hardy?
I very concerned for Jeff.
Yeah.
I mean, he took that knee right to the side of the face. I don't know where it actually hit him, but it looked to me like it just planted right on his cheekbone, his temple. And that's a lot of power coming down off. There's a lot of weight coming down off that top turnbuckle. And there's nowhere for Jeff's head to go. So fearful, clearly. I didn't really ask myself why, but I think your observation is probably mostly correct. I think part of it is too, because of the nature of what AEW finds appealing is so much of the high risk, justified, this is awesome chance, which usually are a result of something really, really high risk and stupid. That's what they're going for. And I think the sense that talent probably feels like they've got to go to an extreme to get over, particularly because you're wrestling in front of 2,000 people on a television show. The audience isn't into your shit at all from the opening match on. It's like wrestling in front of a high school cafeteria crowd. That makes it harder for talent, and they push even further, and they do things that are even riskier to try to overcome that issue. But I think mostly it's the reps.
Yeah.
These guys are just not as tight and as sharp as they would be if they're on the road 3 or 4 or 5 days a week. It is an issue. And I don't know what, I think Dave Meltzer reported the finish went according to plan and it's not that big of an injury. I have heard substantially the opposite. It's a mess. It's a mess and it's a mistake. And somebody's going to get hurt. Seriously hurt. People get hurt all the time. You start taking knees to the head from the top rope, what's it going to take? Somebody's going to need to die? Somebody's going to have to get brain injuries before somebody finally wakes up and goes, okay, we need to get a little better control over what we do and how we do it. I don't know. Hopefully not.
I want to mention neither you nor I are piling on Sammy Guevara. Accidents happen. I don't think there's any chance he intentionally hurt anyone. I just don't.
No.
Just want to be careful that we're not being reckless here. I think we all want the same thing. We want the performers to be safe. And we want these guys to go back home the way they left home. So we're pulling for Jeff and hopefully his broken nose and whatever else he suffered. He's backing at him sooner rather than later.
If all he's got out of this deal is a broken nose, he got really, really lucky.
No doubt. Next up, we've got Chris Jericho and Perry Saturn. Meltzer would say this match was a mix of very good spots, fast pacing, weak transitions, and bad brawling. If you're watching with us over on YouTube, can we just go back to that image of Jericho?
How awesome is that?
Not only that, but Ralphus. The way we got Ralphus dolled up, like this era of Jericho is so much fun. This might be my most favorite.
I was just going to say, can you think of a better era of Chris Jericho than this? I mean, he was at his physical prime, clearly. Not that only here. I mean, clearly his physical prime carried over into WWE for a long time. But I think at this point in time, between being in his physical prime, his creative prime, in my opinion, and he had such a free hand. That was all Chris Jericho. We knew it was happening. We allowed it to happen. We approved it, I guess. But this was generated by Chris. This wasn't me having input or Kevin Sullivan having input. Kevin may have had more than I did. But for the most part, Chris Jericho had carte blanche to a certain point. Couldn't book himself, or he would have booked himself in a main event with Bill Goldberg at one point. Probably still would have stayed with WCW if we'd let that happen, conceivably. But this was, without a doubt, Chris Jericho at his finest. Chris may beg to, or he would know better than I.
The original stip is that Saturn would have to wear the dress for 90 days, but in this match, it's pointed out by the announcers that Saturn's 30 days were up, and he was still wearing the dress. But not only is he
started liking it.
Yeah, not only is he wearing the dress, but so was Ralphus. It's a fun match, 2.25 stars. You're going to see some shenanigans, as we like to say. Dickinson recovers. He awards the victory to Jericho by DQ. 2.5 stars. So you're doing everything you can to convince Jericho to stick around, but he's not long for this world. Billy Kidman is here, as is his bride to be. He's going to get a win over Chavo Guerrero. This is for the Cruiserweight Championship. They go 8 minutes and 26 seconds. Meltzer would say that Kidman won with a shooting star press, but it was a disappointment. Then we get an interesting match. Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko taking on Barry Windham and Kurt Hennig. The idea here is we got, two of the best performers and former horsemen here on one side, taking on Barry Windham and Kurt Hennig, maybe former horsemen of their own. This is sort of rap his crap sort of deal here. Benoit is the best worker on the show with all of his realistic looking offense, according to Dave Meltzer. He says the finish of the match was pretty good with a lot of near falls and saves. The bell never actually rang to begin the second match, which was to begin after a 30-second rest period. Windham took off his belt, choked Malenko out with it, then lariated him and got the pin. I guess it was 20 seconds because it never really started, but boy, did it make Benoit and Malenko look bad. So, I don't know that everybody knows this, but Barry Windham's very tall in real life. And maybe that's what we're talking about here, that Malenko and Benoit were not necessarily the biggest guys in there with Barry Windham. Maybe that's exposed a little bit. He says, that when you book them like this, it's a killer. Malenko can get over because of his size, but the crowd was just not into it. They were dead. Do you think visually it always has to be a David versus Goliath type match if you have a size difference? Have we moved past that in wrestling? When did that change, or did it?
I don't know that it has. I think there's just different ways to do it. Does it have to be obvious? Does it have to be so on the nose and you're building everything off the size difference? No, I don't think that. I think, especially today, the nature of type of offense and high flying shit that we see and combinations of things that we see that we probably never saw until the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I don't think there's a cut and dry answer, but I also think that ignoring the size difference will take you out of the picture. It's got to be believable. And if you're Dean Malenko and you're 5'10" and you're 200 pounds, 210 pounds, and you're in there with Barry Windham, who's probably all of 6'5" and 260, 280. If you don't use that as part of your story and acknowledge the size difference and allow the smaller opponent to figure out ways to overcome it, and that's the essence of the match or the story, if you will, the psychology in the match, I think that's always going to be a requisite in a situation like this. I just think there's ways to address it today that probably weren't available because people back then. But I don't, what are you going to do? Ignore it? Does anybody believe it? Is there any chance anybody will believe what the story that's taking place in the ring if don't acknowledge the size difference and the David and Goliath aspect of it? I don't think so.